Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We begin with Al-Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Ar-Rahmanirrahim. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Okay, all praise to Allah SWT that give us opportunity to gather us tonight. Now 73 participants already attended attending our program tonight, and we are very fortunate to have Brother Adli Abdul Wahid, Head of Cybersecurity APNIC, Asian Pacific Network Information Center, based in Brisbane, Australia. The topic for tonight is cybersecurity and capacity building, and this IIIT online intellectual discourse series number 15. So now after COVID-19, according to ICCERT Cybersecurity Malaysia, they are increased 82.5% in the cyber security issues to compare last year. So it's why we discuss among the IT expert. There are three reasons. First, because we work in our office in regular and face-to-face environment. Now we work from home. We work more in virtual world. Number one. Number two, we spend more time in internet or in virtual world. Number three, there are a lot of other activities in the virtual world. Last time only email, maybe WhatsApp. Now video conferencing, even meeting, transaction, and so on. There's an increasing of cybersecurity issues. We are Muslim world, we have to address these issues, and especially the capacity building. And we are very fortunate to have Brother Adli, that I've known him for many years, since we established before we have Facebook, before we have WhatsApp, we come up with our own email group. We call email group, and we call Abim Link. Then we, Stecker, I study in UK, and Brother Adli in Canada. We meet together in virtual world through WhatsApp group, through email group back in late 90s. Late 1990s. Yeah. So I'm going to introduce Brother Adli, give his the background. Brother Adli Abdul Wahid worked as a senior security specialist at APNIC since 2014. He is responsible for APNIC cybersecurity engagement with the community and delivers training in the area of network security and incident response for network providers, ISPs, law enforcement agencies, and universities. Adli is an active security community member. He was a member of the Forum of Incident Response and Security Term, FIRST.org, 2014 to 2019. Prior to joining APNIC, he had served Bank of Tokyo, Mitsubishi, UFJ, Cybersecurity Malaysia, Computer Emergency Response Times, a team 2006 to 2012, and in Department of Information System, International Islamic University Malaysia, 1998-2006. Adli obtained his bachelor degree at University of Ottawa, 1994 to 1998, and masters in computer science from University Technology Malaysia, year 2000. Without further ado, I will pass this, not say floor, but it's a virtual world, to Brother Adli. Tafadhal, ya Sheikh.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Prof. And Assalamu alaikum, everybody who is participating in the session tonight.
We have 115, 115, Brother Adli.
115, mashallah. So Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So first and foremost, I would like to thank the organizer and Prof. Fauzan for inviting me tonight. Prof. Fauzan and myself go a long way back. I think we first met in the US when he was attending a triple IT event, I think.
Virginia.
In Virginia with a few others there. Brother Sharan too, at that time. And then we worked together, and then he has visited me as well here in Brisbane. And now I am delighted to be able to speak and share some insights on cybersecurity and capacity building. So inshallah, the plan is to talk about a couple of things. But before that, thank you again, Prof. Azam, for the generous introduction. That's pretty much my history. But since we have maybe very limited time tonight, if anybody would like to discuss further or be in touch, I provide you some of my links. I'm on social media, mostly on Twitter these days, basically because there's a lot of security community activities there. But I also have some accounts on LinkedIn, and you can reach out to me on email as well. So inshallah, the plan is to divide the talk into sort of two sections. One is to give an overview of cybersecurity from my perspective. And I'm going to share with you some of the issues and highlights that I think people should appreciate or understand when they think or want to discuss about cybersecurity. I'm very sure that some of you who are participating or listening are already familiar with cybersecurity, and maybe we have experts in the room as well. So I would like to welcome feedback and comments as well throughout the presentation. The other aspect of my presentation tonight, or my talk tonight, will be a little bit on the capacity building, the human side of cybersecurity. Sometimes we miss out on the human element because we focus so much on the threats, the attacks, the money that has been lost, data breaches, the incident. And sometimes we forget that at the end of the day, it is a human being, a person who is defending the network. And it is also a human being that is also causing a lot of problems on our networks or our infrastructure, right? So I would like to have some discussion on that, and maybe share a little bit about my experience in doing capacity building and training. So let's get started. Cybersecurity. When somebody mentions cybersecurity to you, I wonder what is the first thing that comes to your mind, right? Do you imagine maybe computers, or do you think about hackers, or do you think about some scenes from some movie of someone trying to hack into a system, or maybe you have some experience in being infected by a virus. I remember when I used to teach at the university. Normally, 1 day or 2 days before the assignment is due, the students will come to say that my computer has been infected by virus. Can I get an extension for my assignment? So I think everybody maybe have some different perspective of security. And for sure, security today means different things to different people, right? To practitioners like myself, when someone mentioned about cybersecurity, the first thing that comes to mind is the controls that we put in place to defend or protect systems against attacks or threats. So antivirus software, firewalls, policies and procedures. But if you talk about cybersecurity to a normal user, maybe the first thing that comes to mind is privacy. How do I protect information about myself and make sure that things that I share privately with another person remains private or confidential, right? If you speak to organizations like from who are running businesses, they will say security means that we serve our customers the way they expect us to serve, and therefore that means that we will not be disrupted, or our company or our organization will not be disrupted, from a security incident like hacking or, denial of service attack and so on and so forth. So there's lots of jargons here and there. But I think perhaps we can break it down into smaller pieces. When it comes to security, if you refer to many literature out there, you will always find that security is about ensuring confidentiality. So when we do security, it means that we are ensuring confidentiality. So things that are supposed to be secret should remain secret. For instance, we also would like to ensure availability of services, which means that the services that we offer, the system that is running, is always available when people need to access them, right? If we have a system that is processing transactions, those systems should not be down or affected by a security incident. So it is always available, and as a business, we make money, and customers are happy. It is also about integrity, because we process a lot of digital information these days. Sometimes it is very hard to verify that this information is still the same from the time it is sent out, right? So the integrity, can I trust this message that I received from Dr. Fauzan, right? Is it really from him? Because I don't see him. I only see a number or an email address. Maybe somebody spoofed his ID. And that is, in person-to-person communication. But imagine if we are processing lots of data, and this data will produce a certain output. If data has been tampered with, then the impact can be very significant to the outcomes of whatever we were trying to do. So that's one thing, one aspect of it. The other thing is what are we really protecting, right? So today, when you talk about cybersecurity, a lot of people say that when we do security, it means that we are protecting our information assets. So not just information, but also devices or systems that where information resides, right? So those things must be safe and secure, so that there is no unauthorized access or unauthorized modification, or people cannot simply access them and steal information, right, or leak information from those systems. I mentioned already about services, right? We want our services to be always available. Security incidents can cause reputational damages. Imagine if you're a big organization, even if you're a small organization, if your systems are compromised, somebody can access them, then those information can affect your reputation, right? Or it can show that you have no security at all, and therefore, why should we trust you, or why should we work with you? As we depend more and more on devices, right, for our day-to-day livelihood, then disruption to some of the system can also affect lives. Imagine if the medical device that our life depend on is infected by a virus, right? Maybe there could be an extreme example, but imagine those systems are compromised, and therefore it may affect lives. Or if the electrical grid are compromised, if they are connected to the internet somehow, and the electricity is turned off, right? So people who depend on electricity may be affected by these things. So moving on, who is it for? Who is cybersecurity for? So I think everybody can agree that it's for individuals, organizations, and even nations. Moving on, cybersecurity, what are we really protecting ourselves against, right? So here you can see many words being used. I think people are probably more familiar with the word hackers, right? But really, the word hackers can be really vague, and if you refer to some of the literature, hacker could also be a positive thing. So I normally try to avoid using hackers in my presentation or in my training. I like to use attackers, people who have really bad intentions, right? So they are actually attackers or miscreants. You'll find this as well in some books. Adversaries, the enemy, right? And of course, criminals, right? So because they have some interest there, or some motive or motivation to get access to some of the system. When it comes to security, it is also about the how. Like, how are we really going to protect ourselves? So one of the things that we have to do is do a risk assessment, right? Are we really at risk from a cybersecurity attack? Right, so everybody is afraid of something, right? So this is where we try to understand what is the likelihood of, for example, our system or our computer being infected by a virus, for example, right? Is there a threat? Is there a vulnerability where somebody can take advantage of the weakness to gain access to a system. If you think your threat is an attacker or someone who wants to steal information, so what are the possibilities that are available for them to actually do what they want to do? So this is where organization normally get involved in doing risk assessment. Even as individual, I think we should do that. What are the risks when we put a lot of information out there on the internet or on our system? What is the risk if somebody come and steal my laptop? Is it easy to do that? And if they can do that, what can they do? What else can they do? Can they extract information from my laptop? And then if I don't want that to happen, then we talk about the how. So how do I prevent those things, right? How do we mitigate? How do we buy time? Maybe we cannot prevent 100% because again, we are dealing with another human being that can be smart. So we put in controls, right? We have technical controls like the antivirus software, for example, firewalls. We apply updates on our systems from time to time. Those updates sometimes eliminate known vulnerabilities, so they cannot be exploited by an attacker. We also have non-technical means. So in many organizations, you have the policies, the do's and don'ts, right? In some countries, we have laws to prevent people or to discourage people from getting involved in criminal acts, like accessing a system where they don't have authorization to access. So that is security in a nutshell. I'm sure we can talk more about this, but given that we have very limited time, I thought maybe I should stop there so that perhaps you can start thinking as well what that security means to you. Now, I want to give you some perspective, some additional perspective to cybersecurity, right? So the first thing that I want to show is data breaches. So when people ask me about cybersecurity and why it is very critical, I always like to point them to recent incidents, right? Recent incidents. So on the slide that I'm showing you here is a collection of data breaches. So basically, this is data or information being leaked out from multiple organizations, big and small. And what we can see here is some numbers, right? How many data, how many information has been leaked out or been accessed or stolen. And we can also, from here, think of the impact. Now, if you have time, I'd like to encourage you to visit this website. So I will basically go to the website quickly. Let me share the website with you so you can have a look. Hang on, I think it's this one. Oh, hang on, one sec. There you go. Yes. So if you go to the website, it's very interesting here. You can, I think they start collecting information from 2009. And we have some recent one in 2020. So if you click on, for example, so this is Microsoft. So Microsoft obviously is a huge company. They have a lot of resources to do cybersecurity, and yet they have experienced a data breach, right? And this is not to name and shame, but basically to show you that this could be, cybersecurity can be very complex, right? And here, if you click on one of the bubbles, it says, what is the issue or what was the problem? So it says customer support records spanning 14 years were left online without password protection. So attacker or someone can have access to this information and probably profit from it or use it to launch some other attacks and so on and so forth. So you can see a few other organizations here. And what is interesting is we can filter by sector, right? So for example, let's go academic, for example. And let's see, maybe there's one, 2019, Australian National University, hacker access personal information, including address, bank account, details, payroll information of staff, and so on and so forth, right? So we'll take another one, let's say healthcare, right? Hospitals, right? So you can see here, there's a couple of examples here. I think in our region, Southeast Asian region, this is Sing Health, 1.5 million records of patients stolen, right? There is a very interesting report from Sing Health on this incident. If you have a lot of free time, you can take a look how the attacker managed to get into the network to steal the information, and what was the response of the individuals, protecting the network. Maybe one more example. So let's say we'll take government, and you can also see the method, like how did this happen? Was it hacked? Did someone intentionally break into the system to steal the data? Was it an inside job? Like was it caused by someone who is already inside and knew the organization inside out? Was it a lost device? Like somebody had everything in the laptop or in the computer and accidentally left it in a car, and someone steals the laptop and now have access to that information. Was it an accident? Oops, right? Or was it just bad security? So if you just click government here, you can see some government incident involving governments. Let's see. I'm not sure why I cannot click. Sorry, there you go. Right. Yeah. So you can see, different organization, what happened, and so on and so forth. So anyhow, so this in itself to me is a very good example of what cybersecurity is. So if you want to talk about cybersecurity, then we can look at it from that angle, from data breaches, and normally when we do that, it brings up many other questions, right? So going back to my presentation, right? When we look at that situation, I mentioned about organization big and small experiencing a cybersecurity problem, right, or cybersecurity related problem. So is there such a thing as minimum security, right? So what is minimum security that everybody should have, or what is expected from individuals and organization? So from the organization perspective, normally we talk about maturity of organization in doing security. So which means that this is a process that people will have to do and experience, and therefore increase preparedness, right? So this is when you start thinking, what are the threats that we are facing, and how do I increase my preparation to deal with these threats? And today, when we talk about cybersecurity, many organizations have this idea that they cannot prevent security incident from happening, and therefore we have to assume that we will always be breached, we will always be attacked somehow, and therefore, if that is the case, what should we do when we are breached, right? So to prepare for the worst. So that's the mindset. I still remember, like maybe in the late 90s, some organization used to say that we are the most secure, right? We are 100%, safe. These days, nobody dare to make such comments. Security is also about managing incidents and crises. As I said, it's not a matter of how, but when, right? When we look at organization that has been breached, you see that it is caused by different things, right? And the difficulties normally is caused by the different kind of technologies that we use, and nobody is a master of all technologies or master of all systems or software that we use on a day-to-day basis, right? So we always have to depend on someone to do security for us. For example, we have to trust the vendor that they are, they have the best security features enabled to protect data that we are storing in devices or in the systems. We have to trust providers that they have done proper assessment on our network. We have to trust our staff that they can be trusted and they know how to do security, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of interdependency, and sometimes to get everything right is a huge challenge. There's also a question of how much do we invest in security, or do people really think that security is there by default, and therefore you don't have to really spend any money or effort to improve security? There's a lot of discussion about the underground economy, which is basically, all these attackers who are doing things, why are they doing it, right? So people are saying that, well, there's a lot of money involved here. And sometimes people, the hackers or the attackers, they do it for the highest bidder, right? I'll just go in and compromise as many systems as possible, have access to the data, because at the end of the day, somebody is willing to pay for this information, or somebody is willing to pay for access to this system, right? So there is that interesting aspect to it. So in some literature, you will see that the discussion of, we cannot prevent attacks 100%, but we can raise the bar. We can make it expensive for attackers to gain access to this system. Having said that, though, there's also a lot of element of cooperation and collaboration, not from the perspective of those who are doing security to protect their systems, but also amongst the criminals. There's also a lot of collaboration and cooperation amongst them, when they learn together how the technology works and how to break them or take them apart, and use that knowledge to cause damage or to leak information and so on and so forth, right? But of course, on the positive side as well, organizations normally work together, and this is where sometimes even in competing environments where two businesses are head to head against one another in trying to make money or get customers, when it comes to security, they normally will work together, right? Because they are facing a common enemy or trying to make sure that systems are available for their customers. Now, security is not easy to understand sometimes, and this is simply because there's a lot of things that you really need to understand on the get-go, right? And part of this have to do with the technicalities. So there's a lot of technical things involved. But of course, if you are, for example, if you are a security manager, you may not have to know everything. But if you are building security controls, if you are building, for example, an antivirus software, or if you are trying to build a secure operating system, like if you're Microsoft or Android or Apple building, right? So you have to know the computer sciences, how operating system works, the programming, right, the networking and things like that. So there's that aspect of security. But there is also aspect in running the infrastructure. For example, how do I build a system? How do I set up a web server? How do I, for example, set up a blog, right? How do I secure that? Running things 24/7, because now everyone is expecting that these systems are available 24/7. Imagine, this provider service that we're using, Zoom, right? It's a service, and people expect it to be running all the time. They have to make sure that it's secure, and it's reliable for people to use, right? Scaling it, for users worldwide or regional or as many customers as possible. And sometimes, when you have an incident, you have to also know how to investigate, right? So it's slightly different from the foundational things, right? So that's a different skill set altogether. And then overall, managing security overall, making sure that, we are making decision, doing investment, doing the risk assessment. So there's different things that you have to understand. And this is also why sometimes you'll find that in security, you cannot just have technical people doing security, right? You need the psychologists, you need the economists, you need the managers, you need the business people, right? And because they all bring, diverse knowledge for us to do security properly and effectively. Okay, now that's just a little bit on the high level of cybersecurity. I want to move on to talk about capacity development, right? And to talk on this topic, what I would like to highlight is something that is called Computer Security Emergency Response Team. I'm not sure how many people have heard of this terminology or word before. Maybe Dr. Fauzan has, because he knows me. I used to work for a CERT. My CERT. But in implementing security, many organizations or nations have established what they call a security response team, right? So this is a group of individuals whose role is to reduce impact of a security incident, right? So these are people who are expecting the worst. And what they do generally is to respond to a security incident and to coordinate the response, right? So, for example, let's say a hospital has been hacked, right? And of course, maybe the hospital do not have the technical expertise or resource person to deal with the incident, but this group would have those skills, and they may know, they may have contacts in different places. They know vendors who can help provide fixes and things like that. So they do the overall coordination. And as I said earlier, many countries tend to have this. Not all countries have it, but normally, if you look around, many countries around the world will have a dedicated computer security incident response team. For example, in Malaysia, there is a department called ICCERT within Cybersecurity Malaysia. ICCERT, Malaysian Computer Emergency Response Team. Egypt CERT existed. TUNCERT, that's Tunisia Computer Emergency Response Team, and many more. So that's some example. So I happen to have the opportunity to work with one of the CERT, and that's why I'm quite aware of such institution. And what they do when they don't have a security incident is they prepare for this, right? So they do a lot of collaboration, they do a lot of analysis. They reach out to different teams from different people, understand what people are facing in different countries, so that if something like that happen, locally, then we have some experience or some understanding how this works and who we can contact for help, right? So it's like a network of security responders helping one another. So obviously, to do this kind of work, it's not that easy. And I would like to highlight one collaboration that many in here, I think, are not really aware of, right? So within the OIC and member countries, maybe about 10 years ago, 10 or more than 10 years ago, member countries decided that, we should have stronger collaboration amongst us. And I think back then, not many countries have this institution set up, the CERT. So an organization called ICCERT was established, and the goal is to basically, have all these teams network with one another. And the intention was to support one another in establishing the CERT, right? So ICCERT being, at that time when I was working with ICCERT being established much earlier. I think ICCERT was established in 1999. And many other OIC member economies did not have one yet. So ICCERT was one of the teams that were going around helping others to establish the CERT, right? And the idea was that we should increase everyone's capability because what attackers normally do is they will target economies or countries where there is no technical expertise, right? And use infrastructure in those places to launch attack in other places, right? To commit crime and things like that. So if everybody is on the same page, everybody have the same capability, we will raise the bar, right? We will make it expensive, harder for the attackers, the cyber criminals, to take advantage of systems in places where there are no technical expertise. So it's a win-win for everybody. So there's a lot of work in supporting CERT establishment, and I was very fortunate in those days where I was able to go to places like Tunisia, Egypt, Oman, Bangladesh, and we do training, we do information sharing, and so on and so forth. And with this organization, ICCERT, a lot of activities came out of it. Cybersecurity exercises or drills, as they call it, conferences, training, and day-to-day information sharing. And I think most importantly is friendship. And this is something that maybe people don't really think about immediately when they think about cybersecurity, right? And those who work in cybersecurity, they realize very quickly that you cannot learn or know everything. And therefore you have to rely on friends that you can trust to help you or to teach you things when you need to know or deal with something. So in a nutshell, this is an example of a capacity development effort where people who has experience lend help and give assistance to others who are trying to establish themselves, right? And like I said, it's win-win for everybody. And when you have a cert, it's still a journey, right? So you establish a cert, and you gain experience as you operate. And this is where the information sharing is very critical and very important. So if you have time, I would highly encourage you to visit the website, oiccert.org. There's a lot of interesting resources there. You can read the reports to see what are the type of security incidents or threats that OIC member countries face, right? They normally publish the statistics, training. There are a lot of training materials as well, I think. So have a look at that. So although I'm no longer a member of this institution, I still have a lot of friends who used to work with the CERT, and we are still in contact, right? And do a lot of community activities until these days. All right. So the other element that I want to talk about, if you are working in this field, right? Values are of utmost importance, right? And particularly ethics. And this is because if you are a security engineer or a security response, professional, you will be accessing information that are very, private. You are entrusted with, defending the system. And this is very important to understand, because at any given point in time, you can switch hat, right? Attackers will see you as a valued resource, right? Because they may have some difficulties into breaking into a system, but if they can bribe someone who is protecting the system, right? Why not, right? So making sure those who are work in this profession to have very solid principle, right? And very solid commitment and dedication to, to protecting information or users is very, very important. And this is where, you have an element of trust, right? At the very minimum, trust is very important, because in a lot of cases, amongst us, the security practitioner, we share highly confidential information. So for example, somebody is probably investigating a case and have found the technique that the attackers use for hiding information. And now he or she is sharing it with the other defenders, the other security teams, right? And trust is very important there, because we don't want to leak this information. And because if that happens, then the attacker would figure this out. But also at the same time, trust is very important here, as I said earlier, because you are sitting, or you are building application, for example, and you don't want all these programmers or security personnel to be putting backdoors in the application, right? So if I download or install an application, I can trust that this application is actually doing what it claims to be doing, and nothing more than that. It's not stealing information and sending it to a different party altogether. So trust is very important. Trust can be very subjective as well, right? And trust must be earned, right? And that's why you will see sometimes in many of in many settings in other communication or interaction, to trust someone, right? If you want to trust me, somebody will have to vouch for me, right? So someone that is known will say that, yes, I trust Adli and we can share information with him. So it's very interesting, something that I did not realize while I entered the field. But now that I've been doing some work here, I find that this is very critical. And this also means that, if you lose trust, then, sometimes that could be the end of either your career or, your participation in some of the security community. So that's a little bit on the human side, human aspect of cybersecurity. Now, the bottom line, when we're doing cybersecurity, it's people, process, technology. Prof. Fauzan can talk about this, I think, all day, because it's complicated, right? It's not easy to do cybersecurity, and I hope I have shared with you some of the important aspect of it. If you want to read, then there's a lot of very interesting books out there that I highly recommend. So these are my maybe top 5 recommendations. Countdown to Zero Day, just quickly on them. Countdown to Zero Day is about a nation-state attack to against a nuclear reactor in Iran, right? Very sophisticated, very advanced attack. It shows you the role of geopolitics in cybersecurity, right? Sandworm and Spam Nation talks about cyber criminals and also attacks. So Sandworm talks about some of the attack that we are seeing, like ransomware, and how attackers, or those who are building, the virus or the worm, is also being hired by certain parties to launch attack against certain nations, right? I will not tell you which country is mentioned, but if you read this book, you'll find out. Very interesting, very sophisticated attack against critical systems as well. Spam Nation is about cyber criminals targeting banks, and the pharmaceutical industry. This is the book that got me into security, Cuckoo's Egg, right? So this book is a story that took place in 1988 or 1987, I think. A researcher working in a lab in the US discovered one day that there is a 75 cents error in an accounting software, right? And he started to investigate and found out hackers were actually, inside their network, right? And he has no cybersecurity training, but then he started to trace them, right? So his lab was in the US, hackers was from Europe. Very interesting. If you want to learn about internet technologies in the 80s, then this is a book to read. And last but not least, another interesting book called No Place to Hide. This is about the famous whistleblower Edward Snowden, who used to work for the NSA, National Security Agency, and he leaked out a lot of projects related to surveillance by the NSA to the world, and because of that, it created a huge impact in the cybersecurity industry, and it also talks about the geopolitics, technologies, the advancement of security practices in certain nations, and so on and so forth. So yes, highly recommended reading, and I will stop here so that we can perhaps have some questions or interaction. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Brother Adli. Alhamdulillah. We have 221 participants from Nigeria, from Istanbul, Saudis, Indonesia, Thailand, of course, Malaysia, and Kenya too. Yeah, sorry, I didn't read. And so now I open to the virtual world for you to ask questions. Brother Adli, can you stop sharing? Because otherwise okay, thank you. You can raise your hand or pose a question. Say you want to ask question, or you post question here. Okay. Anybody want to raise your hand? Is Brother Yusuf ready? Rasul Rahman you want to ask from Jakarta. Okay, Brother Sharan, can you unmute Brother Yusuf? Abdul Rahman. Yusuf, go ahead. You can.
Later. Let others.
No, you go ahead.
Let others first.
Okay, all right. So you pass to others. Anybody? Okay, I read from some speech in this brother from Rakia, Brother Adli. In some specific personality type related to more cyberbullying. I mean, do perpetrators certain specific personal type? This is cyberbullying. They have a character profile.
Okay. Yeah, interesting question. I think so. I don't really have expertise in this domain, although I'm very aware of cyberbullying. I still remember that in the beginning of my work with the CERT, for example, we used to only deal with very technical security incidents like hacking, fraud and things like that. But over time, we started to get complaints about cyberbullying, and of course, we didn't have any expertise or understand the true impact of that. But I think by now there's a lot of research being done by this activity. And this is very interesting because, for law enforcement agencies like the police who are dealing with the criminal aspect of cybersecurity, because they are supposed to go after the actors who are doing these things, they have two definitions that they always mention, right? So one is cybercrime. So these are crimes like, the technical ones like hacking, launching attacks on systems and things like that. And the other one is cyber enabled crime. So cyberbullying falls into that category because, as we all know, bullying happens in our day-to-day life in non-cyber world, right? And cyber has allowed bullying to take place there, right? So I think with the rise of social media, where everybody gets there, and even children, sometimes without any guidance from families or teachers and things like that, and the internet being so open, has allowed all the bad things that happens on a daily basis on the streets or in school now taking place on cyberbullying. I don't have the answer on the profiling, but I'm sure there's a lot of research being done already in this subject, and there's a lot of awareness effort I see also run by many cybersecurity agencies, so that everybody pitch in or contribute to fighting cyberbullying, because it does have a serious impact on children. I think people are talking about suicides and things like that.
Okay, Brother Adli, this is a question from Abdul Aziz. What are the simple things to look for before downloading an application in order to protect one's data?
All right, that's a very good question. So, so I think this concept of app became very popular due to the rise of mobile devices, right? So I think there's a few advice there. One is that always download app or get app from the official store, right? Official app store, as they call it. So if you're using Android, there is the Google App Store, I guess that's what they call it. And if you are on Apple, the official App Store, because what they do there, right? As far as I know, the Apple or Google, they filter the applications, right, to make sure that it doesn't contain anything that could be malicious, right? Having said that, though, some of the people who are developing apps, they're also very creative, and there have been a lot of cases where some malicious features manage to bypass the checks and get through those and now they are on this app store and people start to download them. So one of the things that you should check, and I think this is available for both Android and iOS or Apple phones, is that you should check what is the app, what are the permission allowed for the app. So for example, if I'm downloading a photo editing app, right? So I want to edit some photos that I've taken. What I can do is I can check what is the permission that I will have to give this app. And if I see that I'm gonna allow this photo editing app to access my contact address, send SMS, right? Access the internet, that's highly suspicious, because a photo editing app do not need to know who is in my contact address, right? So beware of the permissions, right? That we are giving the app, and that's normally something that you can check, and it will indicate to you that this app is kind of suspicious, and therefore I should not be downloading it.
Okay, the question from Andrew Fiat. How about your opinion, or what's your opinion about issue vulnerability in webinar like Zoom, etc.? Is that from competitor or real that's found vulnerability?
Okay, another good question and timely as well. So one thing that I can highlight is that so attackers, they have this mindset of targeting the low-hanging fruits. For example, so what that means generally is that they will not spend that much effort to break into difficult things, right? So they will try to identify applications or software that people use most, right? And spend their effort to find vulnerabilities there, right? So these days, if you are talking about, video conferencing applications, so there are a few popular ones, right? That everybody uses: Zoom, maybe Skype, WebEx, and so on and so forth. So having said that, if I'm the owner of Zoom, right, I'm very fully aware that people might be targeting my application because if someone managed to find a vulnerability there, the impact can be huge. Just like attackers, they like to target maybe the Windows operating system because there's a lot of users there, right? And it gives them good return of investment of their efforts to find vulnerabilities. That doesn't mean that they don't attack other systems, but it just means that it's something that is lucrative to target. So whether Zoom is more secure than others, so that depends, right? So it depends on how Zoom is investing in security, what kind of people is working at Zoom to secure their application, and what other efforts do they do, right? And again, I always like to, number one, look at the features, right? So sometimes we need people who can provide technical input in terms of whether they use encryption, whether they provide patches or updates from time to time, and also about their capabilities. And sometimes when it comes to software, it's very hard because even with some of the software that we use from the big providers like Microsoft or Google, every now and then people still find vulnerabilities, right? So it's just a matter of time somebody will find a hole or a huge vulnerability that is critical. So what is important for us to assess there is how fast do the provider respond, right? How fast do they respond to all these vulnerabilities that people discovered? Do they patch on time, right? Do they have the expertise? So I don't know if I'm answering the question, but basically what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of things or factors to consider before we can say this is more secure than the others, right? So we have to look at all these elements.
Okay. Next question, Brother Tijani Muhammad. For web designer, what do you think he or she will do to prevent his website from hackers accessing since internet is free? Please, what's your recommendation? Thank you.
Okay, so quick one. So it is said that once you put your website on the internet, you are basically allowing the rest of the world to come and to poke at it, to play with it, right? So this is where you need to have very good understanding of how to secure the server, right? The web application and the host operating system itself. There's a lot of best practices. Maybe if you can email me after this, I can give you some links. And the second piece that is very critical for website security is the web application security. So those who are managing websites or developing websites must have good understanding of how to code securely and how to set up their system securely. So there is a group that does this. It's called OWASP, Open Web Application Security. What's P? Maybe professional, right? Or program, and they share a lot of best practices in securing web application.
Okay, the question from Rakia Ashraf. She is clinical psychologist actually. Due to dependency on internet, we are overexposed to issues related to cybercrime. How can we avoid that when we have to use internet for all domains, including the professional world?
Yeah, so I think it's too late to go back to the days where we don't have internet at all, right? And I would agree that in those days probably things are more secure because to steal data I would have to go break into your office and find the vault, steal documents there. But now thanks to the internet I can just do it from my garage or from my house. But yeah, I think this is something that people really have to think, and this is where the risk assessment must be done, not just from the technical perspective. Like why are we putting data in the cloud or on the internet? but also questions like, why are we spending our time 24/7 looking at the screen, right? Is this healthy, right? Is this good for our mind? Are we causing more mental health issues? So I think there's now a lot of discussion in that area as well. I think you probably know more. I'm not an expert there, but I see a lot of discussions, even amongst people who build systems, who the engineers who run networks, that we can build this, but is it really helping us, as human, to be better, right? So that could be the bigger question, and I think this is a larger conversation that everybody must contribute to.
Okay, the question from Zakaria Muhammad Omar, postgraduate student from Kuliah City. How about deep web or darknet? Can I protect privacy?
So privacy, yes, can be protected, but privacy is protecting privacy is not just your job, right? Protecting privacy is the job of whoever you are sharing that information with. So, for example, the university has a lot of information about students, right? If they don't have good security practices, then the privacy of students, staff, and employees could be at stake. Banks have a lot of our information. Hospitals do that as well. Government agencies, right? Companies. If you remember when I showed you that website for all the data breaches, everyone is there. From Facebook to banks to hospitals to universities to governments, right? So we must demand all these organizations who are collecting information from us to be secure, right? In some countries, there are laws in place to make sure that they are compliant, and there are fines applicable if a breach happens. So that's a mechanism to make sure everybody is doing security properly. But there are places where this is not there. Now, the second part of the question is about the dark web. So the dark web is basically, for those who are not aware, a web that is not accessible by all, right? This is a bunch of sites that are only accessible by those who know how to access them, right? And it tends to be the place where criminals normally dump their findings and sell data to other criminals, and so on and so forth. But I would not worry so much about the dark web, because criminals will always have ways to share their information. What I would care more is if people who are collecting our data, number one, do they have the capability to do security? And number two, are they really doing security, right? And if something happens, are they going to notify me, right? If you notice, sites like Facebook, for example, if there is a breach, they will notify you that, hey, we have a breach recently. You may want to change your password in other systems as well, as a precaution. So that's a good practice to me. So will the university do that? Will the hospital do that? Will the government do that if they have experienced a breach? That's probably the bigger question.
Okay, from Kafayat Omo Boyde. Thank you very much for this wonderful session. Quickly, I'd like to know if you had organized a training on cybersecurity. I'm very interested and passionate about this topic. I like to become an expert in it. I need some serious training, and I have little financial capability. Thank you. I think Ethnic, I don't know, maybe IIIT Ethnic can do something. Go ahead, Ethnic answer first, or Adli, can you answer the training that you do in Asia, the Pacific region, the Bhutan, and so on?
Yeah. So yes, I do training from time to time. And my organization, we cover the whole Asia Pacific region. So I get to travel to different places to organize activities. I'm not sure where you are, but if I'm able to go there somehow, maybe after COVID-19 restrictions have been lifted, then maybe we can do that. But I would also encourage you to, or I can maybe share some resources to explore resources that are available on the internet. I tell people, those who are studying cybersecurity today, that you are very lucky, because in the 90s when I studied, security resources is very rare. It's either in textbook or you just have to ask people for that knowledge. But today, if you go on YouTube, for example,